So now at this point, we're almost done with this REST API. There are just two remaining routes that have to be added, and of course the logic for these routes. And that would be those registration routes here, to register a user for an event, and of course also to then cancel a registration. And that's therefore what I'll work on now. And to get started, I'll start here in the database.go file, the db.go file, because we'll need a new table to store all the registrations. Hence here, after creating the users and the events table, I want to create one last table for this API, the registrations table. Now in this variable here, I want to store a string, a multi-line string, hence the backticks, where we create a table if it does not exist with this command here. And the table name should be registrations. And then there in this table, I want to have three fields. I want to have an ID, which should be an integer, which is the primary key of that table and which is created and incremented automatically, just as I have it in the other tables. But then, of course, I need to store an event ID and a user ID. And we need a comma here. Now, the event ID should be an integer, and the user ID should also be an integer, because here I want to store the IDs that we have for the different events and the different users, because a registration in the end is just a combination of a user and an event. Now I will give SQL some extra information here about that relation that we're setting up by also adding the foreign key clause here, and I'll make it clear that event ID in this table here in the end will reference, with the references keyword, the ID column in the events table. And similarly, of course, user ID references the ID column in the users table. And that's therefore it. That is how this table should be created. Hence, just as before, we can run db-exec to run this create registrations table query, or this command, and we'll potentially get back an error. Therefore, I will of course check if the error should not be nil, in which case, just as before, I'll panic like this and say could not create registrations table. So that's the first important step, that we have such a table.